How's it going, guys? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. So, we are about 2 months away from Donald Trump's inauguration when he formally takes power on January 20th at 12 noon. So, we are looking forward to that. But if you thought that the establishment, the blob, the deep state was going to let things go by peacefully, you are 100% wrong. They are working tirelessly right now to jam up his future administration, to throw out roadblocks. We even have his quote unquote Republican allies in the Senate scheming to take out some of his cabinet picks, most notably Matt Gaetz. So they are not going quietly into that good night, the deep state, and they are working tirelessly. And their latest act of sabotage is that they have now allowed, or allegedly Biden has allowed, but he's not really in charge, they have allowed the use of long-range missiles by Ukraine to strike Russia. And that has all of the neocons, all of the usual suspects, gleeful. They're very happy about it. Go on X and they're celebrating. And one person in particular on X who was very happy about this is Alex Soros, who is the son of George Soros, the globalist billionaire who has spent his entire life trying to destabilize the United States from our traditional heritage. He's the guy who funds the DAs who want to release criminals. He is the guy who has been working on Ukraine for the last several decades. George Soros has given Ukraine over $300 million for democracy projects. So he is a big part of the Ukraine project. And now his son, Alex Soros, is taking over because Soros himself is in his 90s and clearly not what he used to be. So here we have Alex Soros saying this is great news. Ukraine will be allowed to use long-range weapons to strike inside Russia, which of course is not good news. But one other thing I like to point out, talking about George Soros and Alex Soros, is their connection to the Secretary of State. And you will never hear this in the mainstream media, and I've talked about it in previous videos. So the current Secretary of State is Antony Blinken. And Antony Blinken, his father, there's Antony Blinken, his father is Donald Blinken, who was the U.S. ambassador to Hungary, where George Soros was born. Now, in 2015, Donald Blinken and his wife donated money to George Soros's Open Society Archives in Hungary, and the archive was renamed the Blinken Open Society Archives. So, George Soros, Antony Blinken have that connection, donating money, Donald Blinken, to George Soros. Again, you will never hear about that in the mainstream media. So if you ever wonder why there is such this effort in Ukraine, well, beneath the surface, all these people who are anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine, are connected, very deeply connected. And in fact, Antony Blinken says that his grandfather fled pogroms in the Russian Empire, and his grandfather was actually from Kyiv, Ukraine. Very, very small world. Figure that. So one thing I point out about this conflict in Ukraine is that there is some people who are anti-Russia who have a family history in Ukraine, in Russia, and perhaps some of their anger or dislike of Russia stems from that family history. I'll give you another example. The Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, her mother is Ukrainian, and her grandfather, paternal grandfather, has been alleged, and she denies this, has been alleged to have connections to the Nazi Party while he was in Ukraine, because he was also Ukrainian. If you go on Wikipedia, they talk about her mother in her early life section being Ukrainian. They talk about her paternal grandmother being Scottish, but they ignore her paternal grandfather because of some of these allegations. And of course, Chrystia Freeland is rabidly anti-Russia. So I always like to point out there are deeper reasons for why we hate Russia besides the obvious thing. There are a lot of people in the West who fled, or their families fled Belarus or Ukraine or Russia 100 years ago. And some of them, they have a good reason to be angry because their families were victims of pogroms, especially if they were Jewish. But that is passed down, that dislike of Russia, to the newer generations. And we have spent the last, ever since, I guess, the Russian Revolution, sort of being anti-Russia. Obviously, the Cold War, Soviet Union, anti-Russia. The Soviet Union collapsed. But our hatred for Russia never went away. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, we went to our next phase, which is, okay, let's push NATO to the east. Let's encircle Russia and hopefully cause Russia to collapse and become part of our neoliberal system, which we got close to under Yeltsin. But then Putin came into power and he stopped that. He slammed the door shut and blocked off that neoliberal takeover of Russia. And we have been angry ever since. And we have been looking for ways to destabilize Russia and collapse the Putin government and allow our influence to take over. And that's what we've tried to do for the last 20 years. And this war right now is just another part of that effort, which has failed. But the people who are for the war, they're at least hoping to cause as much damage as possible to Russia, to hurt them. And this latest allowing of long-range missiles is just another step there. Now, where exactly are these missiles going to be used? Well, it says, the Washington Post, they are to be limited to the Kursk region where Ukraine has invaded because they claim, the Russians are allowing North Korean troops into Russia to fight the Ukrainians, so it's only fair that we allow these long-range missiles be used to help the Ukrainians there defend themselves against this Russian North Korean onslaught. So it's not a full use of long-range weapons to strike anywhere in Russia. It's limited to the Kursk region. And this is how they do it. They escalate piece by piece. So by saying, we're not striking Moscow, we're not striking all over Russia, it's just this little region, we can pretend that we're not really escalating that much, and that if Russia responds harshly, we throw our hands in the air and go, oh my God, these Russians, they're crazy. There's no reason for them to respond that way. Of course, there is. We are giving them weapons, the Ukrainians, to strike into Russia. And in fact, Putin talked about this, and he explains why this to the Russians is such a big deal. So I want to play this 2-minute clip, obviously Putin speaking Russian, and I will read the subtitles in English. There is an attempt to substitute concepts because we are not talking about authorizing or prohibiting, but Kiev regime from striking territory, or the Kiev regime. It already does so with the help of drones and other means. But when we are talking about the use of Western-made long-range precision weapons, it is a completely different story. The fact is that I have already made this clear, and any experts will confirm that both. Let me got a little fast there. Any experts will confirm that both in our country and in the West, The Ukrainian army is not able to strike with the modern long-range precision systems of Western manufacture. It cannot do this. This is possible only with the use of intelligence from satellites, which Ukraine does not have. This data is only from the satellites of the European Union or the United States, in general from NATO satellites. The second and very important, maybe the key one, is that only NATO servicemen can make flight assignments to these missile systems. Ukrainian servicemen cannot do this. So this is not about whether or not to allow the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons. It is a question of deciding whether or not NATO countries are directly involved in military conflicts. If this decision is made, it will mean nothing but direct participation of NATO countries and the United States, European countries in the war in Ukraine. This is their direct participation, and this, of course, changes the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. It will mean that NATO countries, the United States and European countries, are at war with Russia. And if this is the case, then bearing in mind the change in the very nature of the conflict, we will make appropriate decisions based on the threats that will be posed to us. So what Vladimir Putin is saying is that Ukraine is already striking Russia with drones and everything, but these specific weapons can only be operated by NATO personnel. They're too complicated. It's not like people have these ideas of these weapon systems. You don't go and just push a button and it flies out. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot of math, a lot of calculations, satellites. And so Ukrainian personnel can't do it. It would need American or Western personnel to operate these systems, to fire them. So that would mean, according to Putin, direct participation of the West in the war in Ukraine, and they are attacking Russia, and Russia will respond appropriately. So what are Putin's options if this indeed does happen? Well, he has a few options. The first one, which is the one that we're all worried about, is that he decides to strike bases outside of Ukraine, perhaps say in Poland. Poland is a staging ground for a lot of the weapons that come into Ukraine. He could strike those bases and say, well, these attack missiles, which we're getting, are coming from this base in Poland, put on either trains or vehicles and brought into Ukraine. So we're going to attack those bases. Of course, the worst response would be a nuclear response, which is, of course, I don't think that's going to happen, at least not now. So we're worried about a strike outside of Ukraine, a NATO country like Poland, which would trigger Article 5, theoretically, where NATO could now say that NATO is at war with Russia. So that is the biggest concern. Second, what he could do is a decapitation strike in Ukraine. When the war first started, Zelensky was hiding in a bunker. He was worried that Putin would kill him. And the prime minister at the time of Israel talked to Zelensky, Naftali Bennett, and Zelensky asked Bennett, is Putin going to kill me? He was very, very worried. And Bennett talked to Putin. And Putin assured Bennett that, no, I'm not going to kill Zelensky. So Bennett told Zelensky, no, Putin will not kill you. The very day he was told that, Zelensky left his bunker, came out and said, we are not afraid of the Russians. We're going to stand tall. And he did this whole routine where he's a tough guy. He only did it because he was given assurances that he would not be killed. So that just shows you Zelensky and kind of how much of a fraud he is. So theoretically, Putin could change his mind and decide to decapitate go after Zelensky, go after leadership in Ukraine. He could also increase the attacks on the energy system. So far, the Russians have avoided taking it out completely. That could change with this, with these new long-range missiles being given to Ukraine. The third thing that Putin could do is wait it out till January 20th. Some of these missiles, the ATACMS, the Russians have been very good at shooting them down. So even though Ukraine will be given this green light, perhaps these new missiles won't really do that much on the battlefield. Perhaps most of them will get shot down and it won't really hurt Russia. And if that is the case, Putin could just wait till January 20th, wait for Trump, and then deal with Trump at that time. Now, of course, if these strikes are damaging and it kills a lot of Russian servicemen in Russia, in the Kursk region, perhaps he goes, we can't wait for January 20th, and he takes one of the other two options, strike outside of Ukraine or decapitation. So, very volatile situation. The strikes haven't happened yet, so we're going to have to hold on, watch over these next 60 days, and see what happens. It's a dangerous situation, a very, very dangerous situation. And the deep state, they will not go into that good night. They will do everything they can to prolong this war, to make it difficult for Trump on January 20th, provided we're all still here, make it very difficult for him to negotiate with Russia. Just like back in 2016, what did they do with Russiagate? The whole point of Russiagate was to prevent Donald Trump from having any diplomacy with Putin and Russia. So he was scared to, because if he tried it, they would accuse him of being a traitor. So they set him up, and they're doing the exact same thing here. They're trying to prevent Trump, when he comes into office, from ending this war and having any level of diplomacy with Russia. These are very sinister people in the deep state, and their number one project, number one thing, is Ukraine and Russia. They can't get away from it. Your Kinzingers, your Ann Applebaums, your Lindsey Grahams, that is their project. Even when they're losing the project, even when Russia has done everything to destroy that effort to cause them to collapse. Their economy is okay. Their military-industrial complex in Russia is firing. They have BRICS. They're working with China, Iran, North Korea. They're okay. Our project to crush them has failed. Yet we don't stop. We never admit it. We just keep on going. And this is now the latest effort to do that. And they said these missiles are limited to the Kursk region. We have 60 days. Maybe in a month, that changes. Maybe in a month we go, man, these strikes haven't done a darn thing. It's not shaking the bee's nest. Let's expand this. Go ahead and strike some other bases outside the Kursk region in Russia. Let's see if that can be provocative enough to get Putin to do something where we can then claim to be the victim and go, oh my God, this Putin guy is just out of his mind. He's crazy. Donald Trump, how dare you even think of negotiating with this madman? You must continue the war effort. More weapons, more money. We'll have to wait and see. And like I say in every video, nothing surprises me. There's nothing that's too far. These people are quite literally capable of anything. So the next 60 days, hold on. Anything can happen, but let's keep our fingers crossed that Putin is actually the adult in the room and does not fall for these provocations and does not escalate the war and make things even worse than they are. Isn't that sad? We have to depend on Putin to be the one to not take things too far because our own government is absolutely deranged. Well, that is it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.